across as very personal, very much interested in other people, and truly, I think, showed forth the love of Christ.
Can you tell us a little bit more about those meetings, maybe when they were, and do you remember anything in particular that he said to you, or anybody else in the audience that were with you at the time?
Yeah. Well, his English was not great, so that we have to realize that as well. But he would very much talk about going out to people. I was not there, but I remember when he was elected, he tells the story that the cardinal next to him was a friend of his, and the cardinal next to him said, "Don't forget the poor." And he tells that it was at that moment that he wanted to take the name of Francis of Assisi, and that he has really been there for the poor, and not just the poor, certainly the poor in material things, but also the poor in spirit. In my mind, the times that I've heard him talk and the times that I've met him, he was a man for the poor, and he went out to greet the poor, to be with the poor. I think one of the greatest symbols of his papacy was when he said that the church has to be like a field hospital, and he uses that image that you have to build a hospital on the field, on the battlefields, and he saw life at times as a battlefield, and he said we have to be there for people. We can't expect them to go to the hospital, but we have to expect them as wounded and as people of faith to be able to be with them and to build those hospitals, those clinics where they are. And to me, that's always been a favorite image. In my meeting of him, I guess the most powerful meeting was the last one, which was about a year ago. He was sitting amongst the bishops and the cardinals for a picture, and I was sitting right next to him. And in the middle of the thing, he leaned over and shook my hand and said, "It's so good for you to be here." And I will always remember that, for at least for me, as a farewell gift.
What would you say was his strongest quality as Pope? I can imagine how he was with the poor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Could you also talk about the mourning period across the city? I know there's one happening across the United States, but if you could just talk about that.
Yeah, there are 9 days of mourning that will be held in Rome and across the United States. It's very important that we give people the opportunity to mourn, and he was very much loved by people. I think that he will be known as a humble man, a man that truly gave of himself. I think we saw that yesterday as he was in his illness, was brought to greet the people in St. Peter's Basilica, and also in the square, in the Vatican Square. And he never stopped. I mean, the doctors had told him that he needed a time of recuperation, but what have we seen since he's been home? He made these guest appearances time after time after time, because he was there for the people in general, but I think also he was there for the lost sheep, those who maybe were away from God, away from the church, and didn't have a regard for God or the church, and he was there for them. And I think he'll always be known for moving beyond the ordinary and being there. As we know, just yesterday, he had a meeting with the Vice President of the United States. It was a short meeting, but he wanted to greet him, and he wanted to express his appreciation for him being there. So I think that he will always be known as the Pope for the people, the Pope for the people.
I'm so sorry. His health has been declining for quite a while, but at the same time, I heard you mention yesterday he had seemed very full of life. What are you hearing from fellow Catholics and parishioners as far as any sense of surprise just because he did seem so full of life just yesterday?
The reaction that I've heard from people is that it was not a surprise, because they kind of knew that he was living on borrowed time from the Lord. But he wanted to do as much as he could to the very end, and he certainly did that. He never stopped doing ministry, even until the very end. He was at the Vatican that morning and afternoon and died during the night. So he was there to the very end in order to be with people in order to be the shepherd among the people. And he always talked about that the Pope was not a ruler, but rather a father, a brother, a shepherd, one who would walk with the people. And that certainly is a different image that we have seen from some other popes. Everybody has their own personality and their own understanding of what it means to be a pope. But he was certainly one with the people, and one could see that. I certainly saw that whenever there were audiences with him. He was always most gracious and always asking for prayers.
You mentioned his meeting yesterday with the vice president, and he was, very outspoken about this administration's treatment of migrants. Environmental justice was also his big cause, Laudato Si, among others. I mean, he was one of the most open and progressive, dare I say the word, popes in a long time. Do you think Catholics who have that more sort of progressive, interpretation of the scripture should be worried that maybe, the next pope will be more reactionary or close the church off again to people that might have seen an opening that he created for them?
I think Pope Francis's spirit will live on, and I would like to think, and I believe, that the next pope will have some of the same values. Let us not forget that he has appointed most of the cardinals in the College of Cardinals, and so we can believe that the people that he has appointed would have a like mind to what he did. So I think that we can be sure that with issues like immigration, with issues that are going on in our world today, I think we can be very sure that they will reflect much of what he did. And some of what he did was indeed revolutionary, not just his thoughts, but his way of expressing those thoughts, and his lack of fear in saying what he believed was the gospel message. And so I think we can be sure that the next pope will resemble those things.
Archbishop, can you talk to us about the message that's being sent from the Vatican to bishops around the world, and what you envision the Wednesday Mass being, and then thirdly, do you plan to go?
No, actually, Rome expects the cardinals to go for the funeral, but they expect bishops to be in their home dioceses for the most part, to be able to have the remembrance of this in their home dioceses and to walk with the people and to pray for him. So we are not expected to be there. In fact, we're sort of expected to be at home with our people.
On the Wednesday Mass?
The Wednesday Mass, we will have a Wednesday Mass at the cathedral. We thought about having it today, but we realized that this was really not enough time not for us so much to get ready for it, because that's not a difficulty, but for people to come. So we will have a noon Mass at the cathedral on Wednesday, and all are invited. It would be an opportunity for us to have a memorial Mass for him, to pray in thanksgiving for his life and for his ministry and for his faith and for his truly being a shepherd to us. And also it will be an opportunity for us to share our grief. As I said, I don't think it was a surprise that he died. There was some talk that when he was in the hospital, the doctors were very weary as to whether or not, how far they should go with artificial means, because he was so sick. And apparently he knew about that from what I have heard. But I think people will definitely mourn his going. And I think even those who may have disagreed with some of his theology or philosophy, I think that they will recognize him as a true leader of the faith. They will recognize him as a sincere man, as a humble man. And he is that for us, and I think his legacy will live on for many years. He was our Pope for 12 years, but when you look back on it, what he did in 12 years was incredible, in the number of countries that he visited. And he visited countries up until a month ago, and they were wheeling him around in his wheelchair, but he was certainly visible to people. Even yesterday, he greeted the people in the Vatican Square outside of St. Peter's. He would make all these guest appearances, and he was supposed to be home recuperating. But that's Pope Francis. His own recuperation himself was always second, and the people of God were always first. And he wanted to make sure that they knew that God loved them, but also that he loved them.
And you said that the Mass is being held when?
The Mass will be on Wednesday at the cathedral at 12 o'clock, and it'll be a memorial Mass in honor of Pope Francis.
Thank you.
And all are invited. We expect that there will be many people who would want to celebrate his life and to give thanks to God for who he was and what he did. Sometimes we get lost in what he did, but if you look at the sincerity of his heart and his ability to be a humble man, that should speak to all of us, I think. It certainly speaks to me in terms of ministry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
If I might, what should people around the world expect in the days to come in terms of what will be coming out of the Vatican? Obviously, there's a lot of planning, but a lot of this planning is done in advance.
It's done in advance, and there are 9 days of mourning, and he had rewritten the protocol for the death of a pope, and he had made it much more simple than it used to be. And his preference is to be buried, not his preference, but I should say more his command, was that he would be buried in a wooden box, and that they would not, in the past, they would have many layers in the casket. He wanted to be simply in a wooden box. And he will be buried, and this is unusual too, at St. Mary Major. That was his favorite cathedral, his favorite basilica. He used to always go there before he went on papal trips. And he was there just recently as he got out of the hospital. That's the first place he went to. And so he's asked to be buried there. There's a picture of Mary that he's very much in love with. Mary was always very important to him. And he wanted to be buried in that basilica, which is unusual. If you go to the Vatican, most of the popes are buried either downstairs or some upstairs, like John Paul II is buried upstairs in one of the altars.
Archbishop, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I hope that helps.